Is it nuclear or nuclear? Is it hallowed or is it hallowed? To find out, stay tuned for Reach Out and Live. Welcome to Reach Out and Live, a program of music, scripture, and sermon, brought to you each week by the many viewers and members of First-Plymouth Church, Lincoln, Nebraska. Hi, my name's Jim, minister here at First-Plymouth. This week we have the Wesleyan University Choir with the Plymouth Choir under the guest conducting of Stacy Gibbs, and we're looking at the most central prayer in the Christian tradition. The congregation is ready for worship. Let's join them.
And whenever you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners so that they may be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. When you are praying, do not heap up empty praises as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask. Pray then this way.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever.
The Church of the Pater Noster is on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. There has been a church there since the 4th century. But because of all the battles and crusades through the years, it's been destroyed many times. The current beautiful structure was put up in the 1800s. And if you walk into the cloister, you will see about 100 plaques on the walls, each with the Lord's Prayer in the different languages of our world. The Church of the Pater Noster, the Our Father, is in special commemoration of that prayer and Jesus' teachings. I sometimes like to think of First-Plymouth as a church of the Pater Noster, because we too have a special history of commemorating the Lord's Prayer. Let me tell you of it. Now, in the 1800s, our church was downtown on the same site where the Cornhusker Marriott is, but in the 1920s, we decided to move to the very far edge of town. Isn't it interesting how the edge never maintains its edginess, really, as Lincoln spreads out? When we put up this sanctuary in the 20s, on the back wall of the chancel was this massive and beautiful stenciling of the Lord's Prayer. And so when you came in the church and sat down, that was your devotional focus. I've heard tales of people that grew up in this church about how that's how they learned the Lord's Prayer as a child. They would sit there, and the minister would bore them to tears, of course, but they would just look at the prayer and try to memorize it. It was beautiful. The Church of the Pater Noster. But then some drama ensues. Because in the 1960s, we decided to put in a big organ. And on the back of the chancel was the whole organ facade. It was in dark brown wood. And of course, it covered up the Our Father. Oh, but this church found a way to keep it beloved. Immediately, they commissioned a renowned artist in Minneapolis named William Saltzman. He has works in Mayo Clinic and at UNL as well. He was asked to create a sculpture in low bas relief with copper and welding techniques of the Lord's Prayer. And then they hung that Lord's Prayer right up there against that dark brown wood facade, and oh, the copper just popped. You could read the Lord's Prayer clearly, and it was still clearly the devotional focus of the sanctuary. But the drama continues, because in the late 1990s, we decided to put in a really big organ. Big organ. And it has this gold decorative piping, and it's beautiful. But it did immediately create some aesthetic confusion. The copper against the gold, the Lord's Prayer no longer popped, and it became more difficult to read. And a debate began in the church. There was serious aesthetic consternation. The Lord's Prayer didn't look right. It turned into a decorative debate, an ornamentation, argumentation, and factions began to develop. What should we do with the Lord's Prayer? One faction said, we love it so much, take it down and put it in the big west entrance. If you hang it against the wall there, it will pop and we will still be the Church of the Pater Noster. Others said, no, it's too beloved here in our sacred space. We need to leave it. The argument continued until the pastor at that time, Otis Young, in a beautiful move of decompression, simply moved the Lord's Prayer sculpture from back there forward and told the congregation, if you don't like the aesthetics, sit in the first couple pews, you won't even see it. If you like it, sit in the back. And apparently, most people like it because I can't get people to sit up here. But let me be clear, Professor Tim and the Bartles and the Maynards, they're not sitting here in protest of the Lord's Prayer. They love it too. They just know there's good music here today, so they want to get close. The Church of the Pater Noster. It would have been a sad thing if the church at that time fell into an argument about the Lord's Prayer, because the point isn't where the sculpture is hanging. The point is to move it into your heart. Have you noticed we moved it again? Did you notice that? Oh, not the sculpture. I mean, where the prayer is in our service. Have you noticed that during the pandemic, we've moved the Pater Noster up to the very beginning of the service? And this wasn't a rational decision. We never sat around and decided to do it. It sort of naturally emerged because this prayer is our communal prayer. Notice it says, "Our Father." It's not some private prayer, "My God, my Father." It's "Our Father." And during the pandemic, when we could gather, and it's still difficult to gather, but it felt so important to right away go communal, to say this beloved community prayer, "Our God." Let me speak of our prayer this morning, and I want to do so fulsomely. The Our Father, the Oratio Dominica, or the Lord's Prayer. It appears 2 times in our Gospels, in Luke chapter 11 and in Matthew 6. And in both contexts, Jesus is instructing us about prayer. And then he offers us our prayer. Now, clearly, this is a prayer that emerges from that Jewish matrix of the first century. It has all the basic elements of a Jewish prayer. Praise, "Hallowed be thy name." Praise to God, then petitions, asking for what you need and what you desire. And there are 7 petitions in the Lord's Prayer. And one of those is, "Thy kingdom come." That petition would find itself in almost every Jewish prayer of the time. "Thy kingdom come." This prayer has become so central to our devotional life. Let me speak of it spiritually now. 2 things. First, this prayer is astounding in its shape-changing, shape-shifting ability. This prayer can be heard as radical and revolutionary, or as temperate, moderate, traditional. It's astounding, but when we speak this prayer, it can be heard both ways. If you attune your ear correctly, you could hear it as a radical prayer. Because when the Jews said, "Thy kingdom come," in the first century, there was already a kingdom in place. The Pax Romana, there was a kingdom. There was an empire, and it was locked down on them, oppressing them. There was a kingdom. And so to gather and pray, "Thy kingdom come," that's an act of revolution. With the Pax Romana, you show any resistance, and the fist would come. When they prayed, "Thy kingdom come," it sounds like an overthrow. So you could hear this prayer even today as an act of protest. Because, my friends, there are still kingdoms in place. There are still spheres of power that hold people down. There's still kingdoms. They go by different names. And so when we gather and pray this, you could hear it as a protest, or, and this is amazing, or you could hear it as the most soothing, calming, centering prayer there is. Isn't this amazing? It can rightly be heard both ways, as supporting a peacefulness, a tradition, conserving what is so good. You could hear it as conservative or radical. Well, this is our faith. Do you know, so many people with agendas will try to co-opt Christianity to fit their agenda. Whether they have some radicals agendas or some traditional agendas, they'll try to bring all of Christianity, marshal the faith itself to support their opinion. But the faith, it's not about supporting our agendas. It's about transforming us. So hear this prayer in whatever way will transform you. Secondly, there is a line in this prayer that means so much to me. Do you focus on one given line when you say this prayer? I do. There's one line. Oh, but have you noticed, though, Christians have so many different ways of saying this prayer? And it's our community prayer, but it's not homogeneous. We have so many different ways. Some people say, Our Father, but some are rightly concerned about androcentric language and things that keep perpetuating white male privilege. And so we look for ways to subvert that, and rightly. And so you should and could say our mother, or you could say our God, or you could say our Creator. Notice we start right off saying it many different ways, but the confusion continues. Some people put 3 syllables in the act of praise. They say, hallowed be thy name, with a sort of ecclesiastical flourish. The English word is 2 syllables, hallowed. And every time I say hallowed, actually, just because I always have, but every time I say hallowed, I think of triathlon. It's not triathlon, it's triathlon. It's 2 syllables. But we do that with words. And do you say debts or trespasses? Raise your hand if you say trespasses. A bunch of Methodists here. Yeah, okay. Christians say that. You know, ministers used to say, we're about to do the Lord's Prayer, and you can do either the realtor's version or the banker's version. Trespasses, debts, the realtor's version or the banker's version. We say this prayer very differently. Some say sins. And then half my family is Roman Catholic. And the doxology at the end that the Protestants do, that always catches me off guard, because usually you stop and let the priest take over. Everybody says it differently, and I think there's a message in this. A Christian unity does not mean a sameness. A Christian common vision does not mean groupthink. Our common purpose is way above words. It's God. So there is one phrase in this prayer that grips me every time I say it. It's the sentence I need to say every week. Thy will be done. I need to say that so badly. Because I'm all about exerting my will. Well, that's how I've been trained in this culture.
to exert my will, to further my projects, to seek and strive after my goals. I have been trained in this society, specifically also as a white male, to you exert your will, you create your purpose in the world. I need to say so badly, thy will be done. Because I've been trained to be controlling. That's the shtick for a person like me in this culture, to control things. And you're seen as successful and adept if you control the people around you, if you control outcomes. I need to say so badly, thy will be done. Do you know how bad it would be for the world if I achieved all my will? Thy will be done. And it becomes my only chance for peace. You see, the Buddha taught that it's our desires, it's our strivings, it's our effort to exert our will and ego into the world that creates all suffering. And that unless you're able to let go of your endless desires and strivings, even if you achieve them, they're transient. So you'll constantly be frustrated, either thwarted in your aims or you achieve them and then it all goes away. When I say thy will be done, it's my chance for compassion, enlightenment, peace. When I say, thy will be done, I am making the most basic faith claim I know how to make. Thy will be done, because God is a will. I am saying the most basic claim of the faith. God is a will, a consciousness, a hope, a dream. God is consciousness. God is infinite. God is not a thing alongside other things. God is not an object in our universe. That would make God finite. God is an infinite consciousness. God is a will, and God has a hope. And this will, this hope, this love is the essence of all things. Thy will be done. We turn God into some object or thing. God is an infinite love. Thy will be done. When I say that, and I need to say it so badly, it is a basic act of humility. There was a pastor, a really successful pastor of a big church. And at the end of his career, he stood in the pulpit and he said, I've learned two things. There is God, and I'm not him. Thy will be done. There is this higher power to which we can surrender. You cannot surrender to anything else in this world. If you bow down in subservience to some other person or authority or organization or government, no, you cannot do that, but you can surrender to that higher love. Thy will be done. You can set down now all the things you're trying to control, all the people you're trying to control, and you can say, thy will be done, not mine. The Church of the Pater Noster. Thanks be to God.
think it's awesome that you joined us for worship today. Do you know you could join the worship services live every Sunday morning at 9 or 10:30 on Facebook, YouTube, and our website. All of that is made possible by friends like you. If you believe that an open-minded, loving congregation can help change the world, then consider making a donation. It will help us increase the love of God and neighbor, both in Nebraska and the world. If you would like to learn more about our church, go to firstplymouth.org. You can watch videos of the sermons, learn about our many programs and missions, then follow us to Facebook and become a friend. We now worship online at 9 a.m. and 10:30 on YouTube, Facebook, Vimeo, and our website. We also add live events, so join us online. We were looking at the prayer that Jesus taught us in Matthew 6. We call it the Lord's Prayer. And the likelihood is you know that prayer by heart. You have that prayer on your heart, so you're ready to live this week. You're ready to reach out and live.
Tune in again next week for another edition of Reach Out and Live.